So when you're watching this, that means it's already Friday, and I just feel like this week has flown by, and I think it's because we've actually had something to do this week, whereas like last week when we were like on spring break, I just sat around at home all day and I didn't really do anything. So I don't know, this week seems to fly by, so I hope the rest of the weeks will as well. The first part of this is how to reassess. So if you don't care about reassessing your quiz that you took on Thursday, you can skip this part and move on to the actual notes. But for those of you that want to reassess, you need to listen up. The first thing is, if you want to reassess, I have to know that you actually did the review. A lot of the problems that were on this quiz were actually from that review, so you showing me or now doing the review actually tells me that you did study and that you did everything you could to prepare for that quiz on Thursday. So send me pictures of the review. If you didn't do it yet, now's your chance to do it. And then you're going to tell me also when you want to reassess next week, okay? So you can't reassess until next week. I'm going to have to make a brand new test, so it's going to take me a little bit. So just give me a time frame. It could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I don't care when, but just sometime next week. You don't want to put it off any further than next week, because then it's going to just get further and further away and you're going to forget things. So whenever you want next week. And don't tell me like, oh, I'll take it on Monday. Like, I need a specific time frame, okay? Like Monday after 10, Monday afternoon, like, I don't care when, but just tell me when. And this last thing, it's going to be a similar quiz. It will not be the exact same quiz, but I will take the better score. So if you do worse, I'll take your first score, okay? I've said a lot of times. Wow, I almost want to go back and count how many times I said So, oh, now I'm saying so. I'm losing my mind, guys. Talking to a computer is not fun. Not fun at all. So the next thing we're going to do, we're not even going to quiz on this. We're just going to, you're going to have a short assignment today over trapezoids. So with trapezoids, there's typically two types that you talk about. There's just like regular trapezoids, or they want to call them non-isosceles trapezoids. And then the more specific are isosceles trapezoids. So typically you'll just see these written as like just trapezoids. So you can kind of get rid of that non-isosceles trapezoids part. So for regular trapezoids, I'm going to get rid of it because saying non-isosceles every time is going to get really annoying. Trapezoids in general only have one pair of parallel lines. So those would be noted here and here. Okay, there never will you see a trapezoid with two sets of parallel lines, because that is actually when you get into parallelograms. So that's what distinguishes a trapezoid from any of the other quadrilaterals that we talked about this past week or the weeks prior. So they only have one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. So that's like the big thing. And then the consecutive angles between parallel lines are supplementary, and I'll show you an example of what that means, because it's kind of weird. But so just write that down. But if you have a good idea of what consecutive means, this won't be a very hard concept. And then for isosceles trapezoids, they have all these as above, but then the non-parallel sides are congruent. That's where this isosceles, because if you think about like isosceles triangles have two sets of congruent sides, or two congruent sides, I should say. So that's where the term isosceles is coming from. It's those non-parallel sides are congruent, okay? And that would be here. Here. Those are really awful lines. The other thing with these are the diagonals are congruent, so those would be the dotted lines. The base angles are congruent, so base angles are considered down here. And then opposite angles are supplementary. So I'm just going to point to those. So opposite angles would be like from one diagonal to the other. So here and here, those are going to be supplementary to each other. Here and here are going to be supplementary to each other. Okay. Let's actually go back up to this. I actually want to mark this. So consecutive angles between parallel lines are supplementary. They're talking about these two angles here and here. So 1 and 2. They're saying that angles 1 and angle 2 would add up to 180. And I think that's pretty easy to see in this one because it kind of looks like these are both right angles, and right angles are each 90. So if you take 90 plus 90, that should add up to 180. But the kind of tricky part with this one that we didn't run into with just parallelograms is it specifically the consecutive angles between parallel lines. So it's only here and here, or here and here, okay? So you cannot mix red and black. It would only be red and black, okay? So that's what it means between parallel lines. Okay, so for these, I'm not expecting you to memorize these properties at all. I just thought it'd be nice to at least expose you to trapezoids. So if you don't get everything crystal clear, it's not a huge deal. I just want to make sure you guys are aware, like, oh, this is a trapezoid. And maybe you'll remember, like, the basic properties would be that it has one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. Okay, I think that's the biggest takeaway, and that's the biggest thing that they'll hit on, like in ACT type questions or any type of like standardized test. So for these notes, I am actually I'm not gonna do 4 and 8. 4 and 8 are what you're gonna turn into me. So if you think you can do 4 and 8 on their own just by looking at those properties without looking at the rest of the video, be my guest. But I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7 with you guys in the video. So for number 1, we're given that we don't know if this is an isosceles trapezoid, so we're only going off of the top properties for just a regular trapezoid. And since we're finding angle measures, I'm going to think about that property that says consecutive angles between the parallel lines are supplementary. So that would mean angle K and angle L have to add up to 180, and then angle J and M have to add up to 180. So I'm going to find angle K, I'm going to take 180 minus 51, okay, to get 129. And then for angle M, I'm going to do something similar, but this time I'm using that 87 degree angle, and I'm going to take 180 minus 87 to get 93. For number 2, same idea. Here's my set of consecutive angles. There and there. There and there. So to find angle C, I'm going to use angle B. So I'm going to take 180 minus angle B to find angle C. So 180 minus 31, and I get 149. That is not 149. And then to find angle D, I'm going to use angle A. So I take 180 minus 62 equals 118. Okay, so for number 3, I'm solving for x. Again, I'm not told that this is an isosceles triangle, and I'm only told something about the angles and that these are my parallel lines. Well, luckily, the angles that I'm given are considered those consecutive angles between the parallel lines. So if I take this angle that's 54 degrees and this angle that's 8x plus 6, those should be supplementary. So I'm going to take 54 plus 8x plus 6 and set it equal to 180. Okay? And that's again coming from the fact that these are a set of consecutive angles between the two parallel lines. And so I'm going to combine my like terms first. So 54 and 6 to get 60 plus 8x equals 180. Now I'm going to start solving for x and getting x by itself. So subtract 60 on both sides. And I get 8x equals 120. And then divide by 8. And x equals 15. Okay, you're going to do number 4. Moving on to 5. 5 I'm actually told is an isosceles trapezoid. And I'm wanting to write a congruency statement. So I want to tell them what is congruent to DG. Okay, so if this is an isosceles trapezoid, that means that not only do we have a set of parallel lines, okay, but the other set of lines that are opposite of each other are those congruent sides. So DG and EF should be congruent to each other. So DG and EF. The other thing I know about isosceles trapezoids, and it's in the above properties, is that the diagonals are congruent to each other. Okay, the other two properties in here are dealing with angles, so I know right away I'm not going to be doing anything with those because what I'm asked is a congruency statement based on side lengths. Okay, there's no mention of angles in this problem. So if I find DF, DF would be actually one of those diagonals. So then the other diagonal EG has to be congruent to it. So DF is congruent to EG. So for number 6, in this one we're told again that it's an isosceles trapezoid. But however, this time we're finding congruency statements with the angles. So nothing we used in 5 is actually relevant. Again, we're going to think of that the base angles are congruent in an isosceles trapezoid. And the other property is that the opposite angles are supplementary. So I'm not really going to use that. I want to use the one that's congruent because I'm working with congruency symbols. So, when it says base angles are congruent, well, I think the easy one when we think about base angles are here below. So I know V and W are congruent, so I can already say that angle V is congruent to angle W. Okay, now with angle T. So above in the direction, or like the notes part of the top of this worksheet, whatever you want to call it, I didn't really label the other types of base angles, but if you were to take this trapezoid and flipped it, making this the base, you could tell, or you could say that these two angles are also going to be congruent. So there's kind of like two sets of bases, even though we typically say the base is where like the bottom is. In this case, there can be two bases, okay? So T and U are congruent. Okay, so for number 7, again, I'm using an isosceles triangle. Oh my gosh, I just said triangle. A trapezoid, guys, a trapezoid. So we're going to use those two properties with isosceles trapezoids, and that is the base angles are congruent and the opposite angles are supplementary. So I am going to say right away, these guys are congruent. And whenever I figure out what S and R are, they should be congruent. Okay, so the difference between 7 and 6 and 5 is there's no squiggly line, right? So instead of writing, oh, angle S is congruent to angle R, angle Q is congruent to angle P. I actually want to know what's the measure. That's the difference here. If you forgot what this little m means the measure of angle Q. So if I know the measure, I know angle P is 112 degrees. That means angle Q also has to be 112 degrees because those are the congruent base angles that we just talked about. The next one for R and S. So R and S, I'm going to have to do a little bit more work. But there's this property that says the angles opposite each other. So P and R would be opposite angles, are supplementary. So if I take the idea that supplementaries add up to 180, I'm going to subtract what I know P to be to find R. So 180 minus 112 would get me right at 68 degrees. So I know angle R is 68 degrees. And then before I said angle S and R would be congruent because they're base angles. So that's also going to be 68 degrees. And then you're going to do number 8 on your own. I have all the confidence in the world. And that's all we're doing with trapezoids, guys. So turn in number 4 and number 8 and you will be all set for this week. Again, let me know if you want to reassess for the Unit 6 quiz over quads. If you are sitting at an A right now and you got a poor grade on quads, I'm not saying not to reassess because a lot of you haven't taken advantage of that, but I wouldn't stress out too much if you're sitting at an A right now, okay? The people that should be reassessing this are the ones that are like either at a 70, a 71, or you're failing, like, and you need every single point you want. Those are the people that really need to be reassessing. And I might actually reach out to you if I think you should reassess and you haven't talked to me yet. Okay? So let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, have a great weekend. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.